Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea Liebler, co-president of Emunah Australia, and it is my privilege to welcome you to this webinar, hosted in partnership with Emunah and Mizrachi and Brave Journeys. Tonight's discussion unfolds against the backdrop of a profound crisis in Israel. We're witnessing a heartbreaking and complex interplay of trauma from Hamas's barbaric attacks on the 7th of October, the valiant efforts of our soldiers, psychological pressures, and economic challenges. The emotional and mental toll on our nation is significant and likely to have very long-lasting effects. For nearly 90 years, Emunah's mission has been at the forefront of transforming tragedy into hope and success, and today is no exception. Since October 7, Emunah has scaled up its 13 counselling centres and established new mental health hotlines, offering trauma therapy services in Hebrew and English without charge. Emunah's residential children's homes, childcare facilities and schools have opened their doors to displaced families from the north and the south. Emunah Israel's women's advocacy has also been pivotal in challenging the UN Women's Human Rights Organization for not adequately representing Israeli women and girls during this time. I encourage you to support Emunah's vital mission by making a donation. Your contributions are critical in this unprecedented hour of need. Beyond Israel, it has been alarming to experience the swelling tide of anti-Semitism that has washed over the West. It is my honour to introduce our distinguished speakers, Dennis Prager and Tammi Faraday, who will share their insights on tonight's topic, Waking Up to Woke, the modern mutation of the oldest hatred. Dennis Prager is a giant of world Jewry, host of syndicated US radio talk show The Dennis Prager Show, New York Times bestselling author, weekly columnist, and co-founder of PragerU, watched by over 1 billion people annually. He's deeply passionate about preserving America, the West, and the Judeo-Christian value system. Joining him is Tammi Faraday, an Australian television and radio broadcaster, investigative journalist, executive producer, documentary filmmaker, lawyer, influencer, as well as the creator, host, and executive producer of the 5-star Apple podcast Brave Journeys with Tammi Faraday, which launched its 6th season today. And now, without further ado, I will hand you over to Tammi.
Thank you, Andy, for that warm introduction, and welcome, Dennis. What an absolute honor it is to have you here.
Well, as I said to you prior, if you feel honored, I am honored. I'm very serious. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps before we try being the operative word here, to make sense of the benighted world we find ourselves in, I'd like to start by speaking to you a little bit about PragerU. According to Google, over 65% of viewers of PragerU content are under 35 years of age. You have over 1 billion views a year, and yet you concede that despite the inordinate success of PragerU, it hasn't been successful enough. What do you mean by that?
Well, you gave the answer. You described the world as benighted. It's not enough until the world is less or unbenighted. I am asked this a lot, totally understandably, because it has been a remarkable, I would say, success in many ways, PragerU, and I've been blessed with a large audience around the world. But I don't think of that. I think of the staggering amount that needs to be done. And the reason for my hesitation, which is not normal for me, is that I'm self-conscious about issues pertaining to something about myself. I'm totally happy to talk about myself, but not in terms of what I've achieved. But since it was raised, that I don't think about that almost at all. I think about what needs to be done. And when you think about that, So we have 1 billion views a year. There are, after all, I think 8 billion people in the world. Not every view is another individual. People came over to me at the ARC conference that Jordan Peterson convened in London a few weeks ago. People from various countries, and I remember distinctly on three different occasions, 3 different people from Albania came over and said, "You know what? We want you to know you're very popular in Albania. I'll bet you didn't know that." And they were right. I didn't know that. So that's wonderful, but the world's in very difficult shape, and the most important country in the world is in awful shape. My country, United States of America. I mean, there is no institution that has not been ruined by the left, the progressives, not liberals. Liberals vote for progressives, but they have different values. If liberals voted their values, we'd have very few problems. Mm-hmm. Conservatives vote their values. Leftists vote their values, but liberals don't. And the Western world is in decline. The greatest achievement in the history of humanity in any large sense, the Western civilization is being destroyed from within. The universities and the media are 2 of the biggest examples. So I'm preoccupied with that rather than 1 billion views, et cetera, et cetera. A long answer to your question.
Well, PragerU is an unapologetic bastion of conservative values, but there's nothing homogenous about it. So if I'm correct, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but your pool of presenters has included liberals, conservatives, members of the LGBTQ+ community, African Americans, Latinos, believers, Jews, atheists, Christians, Muslims, Palestinians, and professors, as well as scientists from MIT, Harvard, and Stanford, and a dozen other universities, not to mention 3 former prime ministers and 4 Pulitzer Prize winners. That's a fairly eclectic bunch. What do you think makes them willing, indeed proud, to present on your platform?
Well, I'm glad you noted that, because let me react to 2 things to answer your question, why they're happy to come on our platform. And the first one, the point that you had mentioned, which eludes me, but you made a point prior to that. Oh, yes. You said that we're conservative. And I'm proud to be called conservative, but I do want to note that having been raised in a typical liberal New York Jewish home, none of my values have changed. All the wonderful values I was raised with, the pursuit of truth, the support for free speech, tolerance, racial integration rather than segregation, they have all migrated to conservatives. The university I attended for graduate school, Columbia University, has an all-Black graduation exercise. There are only 2 groups that believe in all-Black dormitories or all-Black graduations and in the United States: the Ku Klux Klan and the universities composed of leftists. That liberals are not repelled by that and continue to vote for the party of the left is a disgrace, and that's what I was referring to earlier. So yes, I am conservative, and I define it in one of my columns. I want to conserve the best of the past, the best music, the best art, the best ideas, the best moral insights. Isn't that what we're supposed to give to the next generation, the best of the past? Isn't conserving the best the most wonderful thing that people can do for the next generation. So in that sense, I'm a conservative. Why do people come on our platforms, such as those you mentioned? I'll answer you in good Jewish fashion with a question. Why wouldn't they? The only reason one would not come on our platform is fear of the left smearing them for coming on our platform, which they smear regularly. But otherwise, I can't think of a platform where they would have more views, where they would be taken more seriously by more young people. Daily Wire would certainly be an example, and we love Daily Wire. We want every organization that shares our values to succeed. But the idea that people would not come on is more of a question as to why people do come on.
Very, very valid point. But the question is, as far as I'm concerned, you sort of said almost as a footnote that people would be frightened of being smeared. And that is a very, very destructive force in terms of wokeism, which we were going to deep dive into. So my question is, yes, you're right. People are frightened, and people are frightened to align themselves with conservative values or anything that seems to be in any way a deviation from where they ideologically sit. So I was really just trying to sort of excavate with you why people would feel brave enough. I'm talking obviously in the current context, but it does require a modicum of bravery to be able to align yourself with something that doesn't necessarily scream your values, and yet people feel a simpatico with the work that you're actually doing. I just found that actually extraordinary.
So again, there are a few issues. So for example, if I am asked on occasion, is there any group you would refuse to speak to? And I can't think of any. If I am allowed to say what I believe, I would speak to Nazis. I would speak to pro-Palestinian, which in this context is now indistinguishable from pro-Hamas. Why wouldn't I? That's why I don't understand people who don't agree with us. Why wouldn't you want to come on? I have a national radio show in the United States since 1998. So I'm on across the country. So I remember I've written a book. One of my books is on happiness, because I consider happiness a moral issue, not just a happy issue. Because as I put it every week on my radio show, when I have 1 hour on happiness, the happy make the world better, the unhappy make it worse. And I know that to be true, and happiness is a moral achievement. So a Harvard professor a number of years ago wrote a book on happiness. And I almost never have guests on the Happiness Hour. I do that alone, but on occasion I've had guests. And I decided this sounds interesting. A Harvard professor wrote a book on happiness. I've written a book on happiness. I talk about it every week. I give lectures on it around the world. Let me have him on. And my producer contacted him, and then he refused to come on. And when my producer asked why, because among other things, he would have gotten his ideas out to at least 1 million people, maybe millions. Secondly, it would have helped the sale of his book immensely, which every author wants. Not even for the money. They write so that people will read what they write. So why won't you come on, Professor? My producer asked. And basically it amounted to, he read about me in Wikipedia and saw I was a conservative and would not come on. So this is a Harvard professor, which means nothing to me, because they're indistinguishable from any other professor in terms of courage, wisdom, insight, all almost non-existent in academia. But you then raised again another issue about having some courage, and I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out why are some people courageous and most people are not. It is an extremely important question because without courage, the world will be destroyed. And the truth is, most people are between coward and just sheep. I don't have a high opinion of the human species, in case you're curious, which is one of the reasons I don't get depressed. It sounds odd, doesn't it? But I've talked about this on many occasions. If you think people are basically good, humanity, I don't mean the people in your life. If you think humans are basically good, you will constantly be disappointed, and you will end up depressed. If you know what the Torah says, the will of man's heart is towards evil from his youth, then you are not disappointed in people. Rather, you are pleasantly surprised by good people, by courageous people. So ironically, my sober attitude with regard to humanity helps me deal with what is happening in the world without getting particularly depressed. So I've wanted to know, how do you make courageous people? And my tentative conclusion is most courageous people, that is part of their nature, but not all. And there is a way to become courageous, and that is you want to be. Basically, we are what we want to be. If you want to be happy, you will be happier. If you want to be religious, you will be more religious. You fill in what it is you want to be, and the odds are you can become it. Now, I cannot become, to use my passion, music, I cannot become a concert pianist. That I understand. But in terms of character, in terms of values, we are what we want to be. If you want to be courageous, act courageous. If you're afraid of flying, get on an airplane. Bring 3 friends to hold your hand. Bring sedatives to sedate you. But get on the plane. You cannot conquer your fear of flying by staying home. You can only conquer it by flying. So you'll find this of interest. Whenever I have courageous guests, and I actually ask them that. Why are you courageous? I want to know the answer to that. One final word on courage. That which is synonymous with courage is pursuer of truth. If you pursue truth, by definition, you are courageous.
I concur wholeheartedly. I've just been smiling listening to your beautifully erudite answer, because I think my entire show is called Brave Journeys, and it's about harnessing people's courage. And I think there are a lot of people who, navigate the world in a fairly pedestrian way and have to find it at times. But you're right, they have to make a decision to do that. It has to be a very conscious choice that I'm going to navigate this with the full arsenal of strength and grit and determination. It's just a really fascinating take, Dennis. With PragerU, you've built an online university predicated on the so-called simple notion that the world's most complex issues can be distilled into 5-minute, comprehensible, digestible bites. So with that pedigree of succinctness, which I sadly don't share, can you explain how the world turned woke? This specious dogma that divides the world into oppressors or the oppressed, except when it comes to the Jews, and the fact that these far left groups, by definition, couldn't possibly support Hamas's genocidal sadism if they genuinely believed in their own missions, seems to be of little, if any, consequence, because anti-Semitism trumps logic, rationality, and truth, which might explain why feminists are totally silent about mass savage rapes of women and children, and queers for Palestine believe that Hamas is the bandwagon that they necessarily have to jump on. Are you also starting to feel like the only sane one in the asylum?
No, I'm not starting. I have felt that much of my life. I've always marched to the beat of the drummer who drums for truth. And I will admit, it is part of my nature, and it is something I have pursued. Both have been true in my case. Uh, you know, my life as a fighter began at 21. Israel sent me into the Soviet Union when I was 21 years of age, at the height of the Cold War, to smuggle in Jewish items and smuggle out names of Jews who wanted to leave. By incredible, great coincidence, friends of mine on a kibbutz in Israel knew the person in the foreign office, the Israeli Misrad HaChutz, the foreign office, who was in charge of sending non-Israeli young people into the Soviet Union, because in 1967, Israel and the Soviet Union broke off relations with Israel, so Israelis could not go to the Soviet Union. Israelis had done this prior. So they found out about me. I had studied Russian at the Russian Institute at Columbia University, and I knew Hebrew from my childhood at yeshivas where all my teachers were Israeli. So I was a rare catch with knowing Russian and Hebrew and knowing Judaism. So they sent me for a month, and I came home and I started speaking a few times a week around the United States, fighting for Soviet Jewry. And it started my long march, but against the trend. For example, this is my column this week. I hope your viewers will read it. I was very popular in Jewish life in the first half of my adult life. Young kid, came from the Soviet Union, speaks on Soviet Jewry, just wrote a book on Judaism, which is still a widely read introduction to Judaism, still in print. I wrote it in my mid-20s, the 9 questions people ask about Judaism. And I became less and less popular in American Jewish life as I became better and better known as a conservative, because most American Jews are not conservative politically. So my column this week is about something I have fought my fellow American Jews with regard to all of my life. Most American Jews believe that they will be more secure in a secular America, in a de-Christianized America, to be precise. But as the old saying goes, beware of what you hope for, you may get it. So now fewer Americans go to church than at any time in American history, and their Jews are less secure than at any time in American history. The America was, as the Lubavitcher Rebbe put it, the Medina Shel Chesed, a kind place. Yes, there was anti-Semitism, but it didn't make Jews insecure. It meant that they couldn't join a certain country club or become a lawyer in a certain law firm. So that's wrong, but it's hardly a threat to one's security. Jews started their own law firms and their own country clubs, and that ended that problem. But now Jews are insecure, and it's not a coincidence. 2 incredibly foolish ideas that American Jews supported by and large are the reasons. 1, the decline of what I call Judeo-Christian values. Those values exist. Obviously, we don't have the same theology, but we have many of the same values. And the other is, Jews were wildly enthusiastic about bringing millions upon millions of people from the Middle East into Europe and the United States. And I wrote at the time, people bring their values with them when they move. They may not have clothing, they may not have money, they may not have luggage, but they have values. And the values of not all, but many of those people are the antithesis of Western values, and to boot, anti-Jewish. But Jews were gung-ho on bringing them into America because they felt good about themselves. Oh, look, these poor people, Syrians are killing them, and they were poor people. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. But they didn't think through their battle to secularize America, that is American Jewry, and they didn't think through their battle to bring in millions from the Middle East. And now, for the first time in American history, Jews are insecure thanks to two positions most American Jews fought for.
Do you think, I do want to speak about immigration a little bit later and the impact on Western civilization, but do you think, as Ben Shapiro put it, we're living in a post-truth era where the truth doesn't really have any import?
Correct. That's why I said truth and courage are identical. We are living in a post good and evil era. I wrote this decades ago. We have substituted for good and evil. We have substituted rich and poor, white and non-white, male and female, oppressed and oppressor, colonizer and colonized, everything except good and evil. Well, when you drop that, that's the only division that matters in humanity. Race is irrelevant. Ethnicity is irrelevant. Wealth is not irrelevant to the individual, but is irrelevant to assessing right and wrong. A poor person could be bad or good. A rich person could be bad or good. So we have entered the realm of post morality. I saw this when I was in my 20s at Columbia. My professors would not declare America as morally superior to the Soviet Union. I was taught that it was just two superpowers battling for hegemony, battling for spheres of influence, that it was two economic systems, communism and capitalism, not tyranny and freedom. No, that wasn't the battle. The battle was two economic systems. So this is not new. I was in graduate school a long time ago.
So was I. You're an American patriot. So it seemed very stark coming from you that you ruefully said that the United States is the greatest exporter of toxic ideas in the world. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, we are. This is, excuse me, this is where one can truly cry. Where did the world get the idea that a man can become a woman from? That men give birth? Where is that idea, that asinine lie, and that is destroying so many young people's lives and causing massive chaos in society? A man can identify as a woman. You can identify as anything you like. At least you can in a free society. But you are not one. The fact that you identify as it doesn't make you one. You are not. A man is a man. You are born. The sex you are born with is who you are. The amount of toxic ideas, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, all of what is called woke, the epicenter is the United States. But there is an important caveat here. And that is that while it is true, tragically, that the United States is the greatest exporter of toxic ideas, it is also the greatest exporter of anti-toxic ideas. There is no country in the world that has as strong an anti-woke, anti-left intelligentsia and mass movement as the United States does. Canada doesn't. Australia doesn't. New Zealand doesn't. In fact, for reasons I have not figured out, the English-speaking countries are the worst. But in any event, that is why I said if we fail in America, then it's over for humanity. In fact, there's no doubt in my mind that the weakening of America's self-confidence as a moral force in the world has been instrumental in the chaos in the world today. As I've said, and by the way, there are conservatives who think America should be isolationist. This is a very troubling fact of life as well. Mm-hmm. I have argued all of my life that just like the streets of a city need policemen, the world needs a policeman. And if it's not going to be America, it will be China or Russia or the United Nations. And I don't think that would be good for the world. If America weakens, cruelty on earth is amplified exponentially.
So while the radical right propagates the classic conspiracy theories that are central to Jew hatred, the radical left claims that Jews didn't have a homeland before 1948 and promotes the myth that the land of Judea had no historical, biblical, cultural, and/or emotional nexus to Jews, as well as comparing Israeli soldiers to Nazis and accusing Israel of monstrous crimes such as harvesting organs, which we all know are synonymous with the crudest medieval blood libels. And the left does all of these things not on fringe websites or in clandestine meetings in someone's basement like the alt-right do, but in classrooms, as you've said earlier, at some of America's most prestigious academic institutions. I am not from America, but we have seen it on college campuses all over the United States. Can we talk about the trajectory of extreme anti-Jewish, anti-Israel sentiment in the past few years on campuses, particularly in the United States?
Well, they have been groomed into moral chaos for at least half a century. As I said, as I was taught men and women are basically the same. That was part of what I was taught. So the war on truth has consequences, and the academic world, and I have a theory as to why. I'll give it to you in a moment. The academic world has been the mother, if you will, the birthing person, as they put it in the woke world, of these ideas. As Orwell put it, and others, that idea is so stupid only an intellectual can believe it. So I have a theory as to why the universities have led the way to moral chaos and intellectual vapidness. And it came to me, it is the only time in my life I had an epiphany. I've never had a theophany. God has never appeared to me directly. I find God in the Torah, which is why I've written 4 of the 5 volumes of my Torah commentary called the Rational Bible. Because if we bring the Torah to the world, we'll solve the world's problems. It's another subject about Jews not having most Jews not feeling a mission, most religious Jews not thinking of a mission to the world. Mm. Ironically, left-wing Jews feel a mission to the world. Mm-hmm. But in any event, here is my theory. Mm-hmm. And it happened through this epiphany. I wrote about this 25 years ago, so I haven't made this up. As a graduate student at Columbia, I walked around the campus one day wondering, why are so many intelligent people teaching me nonsense? Like men and women are basically the same. The US and the Soviet Union is not a moral battle, but an economic war, etc. And then out of nowhere, a Hebrew verse that I had said last in 3rd grade, when we said it every day in our prayers at Tefillah, but I hadn't said it since 3rd grade, and it came into my brain in Hebrew. Reshit Chochma Yirat Hashem. Wisdom begins with fear of God. And that did it. That explained everything. There's no God or Bible at Columbia, so there's no wisdom at Columbia. Our universities are the stupidest institutions of modern life, and they are the most secular institutions of modern life. There is no wise secular institution. It doesn't exist. And that's part of the idiocy that Jews have believed in. The university, they sort of worship the university. My child goes to Cornell is the greatest thing most Jewish parents could say. Not my child is a fine human being. My child got into Cornell or Yale or Princeton or Berkeley or Stanford. That is nachas. It is a form of avodah zarah, of wide idol worship in Jewish life, the worship of the university. And so Jews go into this place, learn foolishness, and believe that God and Bible are unnecessary for wisdom. They got no wisdom at the university, none. And that's the issue. Do you know you could not graduate from Harvard until 1800 if you did not know Hebrew? The insignia of Yale University is in Hebrew, Urim v'Tumim. The breastplate that the Kohen HaGadol, the chief priest, wore is the insignia of Yale. These universities were founded to teach theology as well as the sciences and history and literature and art and music. But when you get rid of that, you end up a fool. There are religious people who are foolish. There are some secular people with wisdom, but there's no secular institution with wisdom. And that is, we are now seeing the results of it. The moral chaos. Israel, as I said, and this is, people could watch this, it's gone viral, when I debated at the Oxford University.
8 years ago, which I am going to speak about to you later, but it was 8 years ago and it could have been yesterday. It literally
could have been yesterday. That's right. In fact, people who know me or come over to me at speeches said, "Oh, so you were just at Oxford. I just saw you on the internet." And I go, "No, that was 7 years ago."
Yeah.
Because nothing has changed. And the theme was, who is the greater threat to peace in the Middle East, Hamas or Israel? And I said, the truth. I said, I can't believe this is a subject. Did they debate in 1939 who is a greater threat to peace in Europe, Germany or Britain? Why is this any different? This is the first time in history, in modern history, that people think that between a police state and a free state, the free state is the aggressor. There is no example of that in modern history. All wars are either between two police states or between a police state and a free state, never between free states. And since when? Give me one other example where the free country is the aggressor.
Well, just going back to the universities for a moment, this moral chaos that seems to have become ubiquitous across the university/college landscape. How do we stop this chicanery being taught in our schools and universities and infecting our children's minds? Because from what you've said, we're talking about 50 years of this. So how do we roll any of this back?
So I have a few answers. The most obvious is, unless your child is going to study STEM, science, technology, engineering, or math, don't send them to college. And in America, I tell people, don't give a penny to any university, with the rare exceptions of those that teach truth or attempt to teach truth. Let's put it that way. That's one. That's the only thing they'll understand. Fewer students is less tuition is less money. Number two, prepare your child for the lies they will and the idiocies that they will learn at universities. Prepare them in advance. Generally speaking, between what we call high school and university, you should not have them go immediately into the university. They should take at least a year off to experience life. The best thing they could do is become a waiter or waitress for a year, to actually deal with humans and not with DEI ideas. diversity, equity, inclusion ideas. Or send them, I've actually advocated this for the vast majority of my listeners are not Jewish. And I say, send your child to Israel for a year. I've said this for years. It has nothing to do with the current war. Because then they will see real life, and they will see that there are peoples whose existence is threatened every day. And it is sobering. The gallows sobers the mind. And I'll tell you another thing. If you, anyone watching this, certainly their children, were to watch the 15 or so videos, we have 600 of them now. We have 600 5-minute videos. They're all masterpieces. You have no idea how much work goes into every one of them, because we know we only have 5 minutes. But if one were to watch the 15 or so videos on the Middle East, that would be the single greatest education they could get about the Middle East. For example, the head of a British general, the head of all the British forces in Afghanistan, made a video for us. Kemp is his name, General Kemp. And you know what the title is, or the subject is? I don't remember the exact title, but it's something to this effect. Israel, the Israeli army is the most moral army in the world, given by a British general. We have another one on the 6 times or 5 times that the Palestinians have rejected a Palestinian state. You will not learn this at any university. No. You can get a PhD in Middle Eastern history and not learn that every time the Palestinians have been offered a state, they've rejected it, because their interest is not in a state. Their interest is in destroying Israel. We have a brilliant video by one of the greatest living thinkers, George Gilder, a non-Jew, called The Israel Test. He wrote a book on it, and he summarized it in 5 brilliant minutes. See how people, this is his theory, see how people react to Israel, and you know their value system. People who hate those who succeed hate Israel. People who want to emulate those who succeed love Israel. And that's exactly right. Losers hate Jews. That's a law like 2 + 2 = 4. There is a brilliant story in the Torah. That's why I'm writing my commentary on the Torah, because it's filled with brilliant stories and insights and laws. When Isaac gains wealth through having dug wells, and interestingly enough, the Philistines come, and what do they do when they see his wealth and his wells? They don't say, hey, let's learn from this guy, then we could become wealthy. No, they fill up his wells. They stuff his wells with dirt. That is the human condition. America was founded on, if the next guy is richer than you, figure out how you can get richer. Don't hold him up. Don't mug him and steal his money. But that is the left's view. If anyone does better, bring them down, destroy them. And that is the general view in the Muslim world of Israel. It's too successful. Tom Sowell, one of the greatest thinkers of the last 50 years, is a Black economist. I only mention he's Black so that people just know that fact. But the man is a genius. And the man is a genius. And I know him. He's been on my show many times. And there's a 10-minute video of him explaining anti-Semitism. And he just says the anti-Semite is a loser. He said they hate Israel because it succeeds. That's it. And if you want Israel, if you want the Jews to be loved, All they have to do, these are his words, is fail.
You think that would be enough?
No, but his point is well taken.
Absolutely.
Had Jews been failures for 3,000 years, there would have been less Jew hatred. But I agree with the rabbis at the Talmud that the sinah, the hatred, comes from Sinai, from Sinai. They hate our Torah.
Until the 7th of October, we've spoken about this as well, the overwhelming majority of American Jews found themselves on the left side of politics. I think it's something like 70 to 80% voted left. Now,
yeah, 70, yeah.
Now left-leaning American Jews feel utterly betrayed and abandoned. But perhaps the only thing that's confounding is their shock. So I just want to unpack with you, if we can, what may actually be internalized anti-Semitism, particularly when it comes to American Jewry, who seemed more inclined in the past to champion other people's causes than ours. And I don't ask this with a modicum of judgment, but I wanted to know from you, do you think it's because there's such pronounced assimilation that many feel that they've truly removed their Jewish yoke from their identity? Do you think it's that they're terrified? Are they in denial? Or are they so desperate for acceptance, which is something I think many of us can be accused of?
So are you talking about the Jews who are anti-Israel or just Jews who are pro-Israel but on the left?
Either or, actually. But Jews who have basically taken up the mantle of every left cause.
Well, that's because, those Jews are very rarely believers that the Torah is a divine document. There are two types of Jews: Jews who think the Torah is at least contains God's word. I think it ultimately is God's word. But in any event, that's the division. So that though that's a religion, God gave us the Torah. However you wish to interpret it, that is our religious faith. Those who are religious Jews. The vast majority of Jews do not believe that. So they have another religion. You name the ism, it's another religion. Marxism, socialism, environmentalism, feminism, humanism. If it's an ism, Jews either founded it or helped lead it. As I've said all of my life, Jews are the most religious people in the world, but their religion is rarely Judaism. Remember, religious Jews don't vote left. They already have a religion.
So how do we fortify Jewish youth? How do we imbue pride in our children and assuage their completely legitimate fears?
Well, I brought a lot of young people to Judaism in my lifetime. And interestingly, I don't use the term pride. I'm proud of the Torah more than I am of Jews, to be contrarian for a moment. There've been a lot of bad Jews. So if you're going to be proud of good Jews, then you have to be ashamed of bad Jews. You have to be intellectually honest. You know, we gave the world Trotsky, not just Nobel Prize winners. We gave the world George Soros. We gave the world most of the people who gave Stalin the atom bomb were Jews. So I'm not a big fan of the word pride. I'm a big fan of the Torah. And if you explain it to young people, which I've spent my life doing, as an example, I began lecturing at the age of 21. My whole adult life, I've been in public life. And I would go to schools, American schools, not just Jewish schools. And I would say, how many of you have a dog? Almost every hand went up. How many of you love your dog? Every hand went up that had a dog. I got a question for you. I've been asking this for almost 50 years. If your dog and a stranger were drowning, who would you try to save first? In every instance, till this day, 1/3 vote for the dog, 1/3 for the stranger, and 1/3 don't know what they would do. I allow that option for the voting. So 2/3, since I began asking this question, do not vote to save the person before their dog. Why? I love my dog. I don't love the stranger. So their whole moral universe is feelings. There's no systematic right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel? You love your dog. Okay, I love my dog, but I would save a stranger. It would be painful, but I would do it because strangers are created in God's image and dogs are not. I have a very clear value system. I shake kids up when I do that.
Mm.
I look at them and I say, you're wrong. I don't say, oh, thank you for your thought. Thank you for sharing your feelings. You're wrong. Not only that, I look at the kids who voted for the stranger and I say, will you tell your classmates who voted to save their dog first that they're wrong? Not once was any prepared to say they're wrong. Everything, even the ones who voted morally correctly, have been imbued with the idea that there is no objective right and wrong. It's all a matter of feelings and opinion. Just they feel that they should save the person and they feel they should save their dog. So I have spent my life making the case to Jewish Kids for Judaism, making the case for all kids of basic Judeo-Christian values. It's pretty effective if I'm allowed to talk to them. That's another problem, of course, on our campuses. And most Jewish schools won't invite me in the United States. Orthodox schools do, but non-Orthodox schools don't, because what I just said, there's one right answer to many moral questions, bothers them.
Yes. As I said in a piece that I produced weeks ago, from the river to the sea, jumping back to the conflict and to the hell since October the 7th, from the river to the sea is not a euphemism. It's Hamas's KPI. And you say that from the river to the sea, and what it actually means is one of the most frightening phenomena of our very dark time. And let's not forget, let's just do a stock take here. There are 22 Arab states, there are 52 Muslim states, and there is one Jewish state that could fit inside New Jersey. Do you think, Dennis, that diasporic Jews have been living in a state of mendacious denial by not recognizing that groups like Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Boko Haram, and the Iranian regime seek the complete decimation of Jews and the state of Israel?
Most Jews, like most graduates of college, live in a make-believe world. The same people who believe men can become women do not believe that the Palestinians want Israel dead. Does every Palestinian? No. Do most? Yes. But the argument, not all, is specious. Not all Germans were Nazis. Not all Russians were communists. But you know what? It didn't matter.
Dr. Einat Wilf, a former foreign policy advisor to late Prime Minister Shimon Peres, said that the day that From the River to the Sea has the same social standing as Heil Hitler will have made a massive step towards peace, because that will be the moment that people will truly understand the ideology that has been animating this conflict forever, namely that the Jews wanted a state in their ancestral homeland and the Arabs did not want the Jews to have a state. Is it that simple? Am I being reductive? And if it is that simple, what do we do with that?
Well, one of the 15 videos that I recommended people watch at PragerU, they're all free, is the first one on the Middle East, which I gave. I give 10% of the 600 videos. 90% are given by other people. But I gave this one explaining the Middle East conflict. And I said, it's really not complex. One side wants the other side dead. I made that video about 10 years ago. It was true 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and 75 years ago. And it is true today. So that's it. What you said, is it the day they stop saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, there will be peace, because that means they've accepted the existence of the Jewish state of Israel. But with the moral breakdown of the West and the actual inversion of moral categories, they have every reason to think that as time goes on, the world will more and more support them. And as it is.
You were born in 1948, the same year as the establishment of the State of Israel, and just 3 years after the end of World War II. You're a scholar of the Cold War and of the Middle East. Did you ever believe that you'd see such a scale of anti-Semitism in your lifetime?
Well, Rabbi Joseph Telushkin and I wrote many years ago, Why the Jews, the Reason for Anti-Semitism. And for one of the chapters in the book is there a difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism? And of course there isn't. It's just the latest term for it. That we're expected to believe you are not anti-Jew, but you want to destroy the one Jewish state that exists, but you're not anti-Jewish. Again, this is another example of the ability of people to believe their own lies. Oh, I like Jews, I just want to destroy the Jewish homeland. So what if people said that about Italians? I really like Italians, I like Italian food and Italian art and music, but I think Italy should be eradicated from the map. Wouldn't most people say they're anti-Italian, even if they like pizza? It's what the lies we're expected to believe are just overwhelming. Did I expect this? So I return to my book on happiness. I have no expectations. When I was in England doing some of my university study before graduate school, I took courses in comparative religion. I've always been fascinated by religion. And one of my professors was a great scholar. You could look him up, Trevor Ling. He was a Buddhist. And one day he said to us, Buddhism's answer to suffering is that all pain comes from desires and expectations. And therefore, in Buddhism, they try to eradicate desires and expectations. I listened and I thought, wow, that man just changed my life. I won't drop desires, neither personal. I desire a family, I desire a home, and I desire a cure for cancer for the world. I have many desires. But from that moment, I was 19 years old, till today, I have had no expectations. So I live in a state of permanent gratitude and shock at how good things are for me, because I expect nothing. So I don't ask myself, do I expect anti-Semitism? Do I expect philo-Semitism? My question, the questions I ask and grapple with are, what is the reality and what can we do about it? Those are my two questions in life. The reality is that the post-Judeo-Christian West is a moral cesspool. And therefore, what do I have to do? I have to make the case for Torah-based morality for as many human beings as I can reach while I am still on this earth. That's why, I mean, nobody writes a commentary on Deuteronomy to make money. But I know that the antidote to evil are those 5 books, the 5 books of the Torah. but they're not explained in a way that makes them morally and relevant. There are many wonderful rabbis. I'm not knocking them. I studied under wonderful rabbis, but there were 4,000 reviews on Amazon of my Bible commentary, the Rational Bible. Nearly all of them are from non-Jews who never read the Torah as a Jewish book in their lives. Mm-hmm. And they say, this changed my life, this changed my life, this changed my life. I'm not saying this to give accolades to me. I'm saying this, that's why I'm self-conscious, but I don't care. If someone leaves thinking I'm praising myself and reads it, it's worth it. Mm-hmm. But I'm not praising me. I'm praising the effort to bring the greatest insights of humanity into the world. For example, you want to understand the left? All you need to understand is this. What did God do on the second day of creation? He created nothing. All he did was separate. He made order. The most important verse in the Bible, in my opinion, is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The second most important is the second verse. And everything was chaos. Tohu vavohu is chaos. The left wants to undo the order that God made in Genesis with chaos. The battle we have today is ultimately the Torah versus the left. That is the battle. That there were so many Jews who buy left-wing values is only an ode to the fact that Jews without Torah don't have all that much wisdom. And I'm not talking about being Orthodox. I'm just talking about believing the Torah, taking the Torah as ultimately a divine book. How you observe Shabbat is between you and God. But whether you take that book seriously, that matters to the humanity.
I wanted to provide you with a quote of Suella Braverman. She's a KC and the recently ousted Home Secretary. She was criticised by fellow Conservative MPs just a few weeks before Hamas invaded Israel, after she claimed during a speech that she delivered to the American Enterprise Institute, which is a centre-right think tank in Washington. She says, multiculturalism makes no demands of the incomer to integrate. It has failed because it allowed people to come to our society and live parallel lives in it. They could be in the society, but not of the society. And in extreme cases, they could pursue lives aimed at undermining the stability and threatening the security of our society. We are living with the consequences of that failure today. You spoke earlier about immigration and certain choices that have been made by Western governments in terms of allowing people of different backgrounds and demographics to come in. With the record levels of mass immigration that have caused significant demographic changes in the US and the UK and many other parts of Europe, do you believe that multiculturalism is a threat to Western civilization?
I attacked it the first time I heard it. As I pointed out, America is multi-ethnic. It was never multicultural. There was an assumed unity of values. That means everybody agreed on everything. We've always had two parties. People who believed in slavery and people who were anti-slavery. We certainly had divisions. But as I pointed out in American terms, every American coin has what I have dubbed the American Trinity. And they are, in God we trust, e pluribus unum, and liberty. And that's the American culture in three phrases or three words. When you bring in people with different value systems, and then you argue for multiculturalism, no culture is better than any other. That's what the person you were quoting is basically arguing against, the nonsense. Really, all cultures are morally equivalent? Is that right? Then why was it that only in the West did slavery become banned? Why did it start in Britain and then go to America and elsewhere? Why didn't anti-slavery begin among the indigenous peoples? The Maori, to take your area of the world as an example, or Africans or Asians. The Chinese banned slavery? No. One of my passions is classical music. I conduct orchestras periodically.
As you do. As you do.
Well, I don't do everything, but what I take seriously, I really pursue. And I only mention that because I therefore read a lot about music. About 20 years ago, the chief music critic of the New York Times wrote that Beethoven's Third Symphony is no better than Indonesian gamelan music, because he was a left-wing moron and he works for the New York Times, and that qualifies him. I mean, that is a truly stupid statement, but that's multiculturalism. No culture is better than another. The fact is, Beethoven's Third, by any criterion one wishes to use, is superior to Indonesian gamelan music. And just in case one thinks I'm anti-Indonesian gamelan music, it's better than any Jewish music. Okay? I love Adon Olam. I love the melodies at Shul, but they're not Beethoven's Third. End of issue. And a Jew who says it's as great as Beethoven's Third is an ignoramus. In Japan, they listen to Beethoven's Third more than they do to Indonesian gamelan music or Adon Olam, because it is universally great. The Japanese and the Koreans and the Chinese are the leading, disproportionately leading in great musicians today, in classical musicians, because it is the most universal music ever written, classical music. But if you work for the New York Times, you're not allowed to say that. So nothing is better than anything else. Judeo-Christian values are no better than Muslim values. Muslim values are no better than Buddhist or Shinto values, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we're living the consequences of multiculturalism. Hamas is no worse than Israel, or Israel is no better than Hamas. That's true multiculturalism.
So if that's the case, when we're considering the existential threat to Israel, do you really believe that Israel can cut the head of the snake? And obviously, in asking this, I'm talking about the underwriters, the facilitators, the propagators of Islamist jihadi rhetoric and actions. And I do want to be clear, we're of course not talking about moderate Muslims or moderate Arabs who long for peace.
I don't know the answer. I don't know if anyone knows the answer. I only know that Israel has to make that attempt. And I don't know what Israel should do. I have been in the business of all of my life of protecting Israel, not criticizing it. If I want to criticize Israel, I get on an airplane, make aliyah, then I can criticize it all I like. But living in the safety, in my case, of Los Angeles, half a world away, it's none of my damn business to tell Israel what to do. I support Israel when they have a left-wing prime minister and when they have a right-wing prime minister. I don't tell them how to vote. I don't tell them how to prosecute a war.
Why is Israel so vital to world Jewry?
Well, we all know the answer. What happened to the Jews when there was no homeland to take them in, to protect them?
Or as a soldier I spoke to very recently said to me, we know exactly what Israel looked like without an army. When there is no fortified.
And we know exactly what world Jewry looks like without an Israel.
Yeah. That was the analogy.
That was the good analogy.
Dennis, what does the world need to understand about the resolve of the Jewish people?
Well, the question implies that there is a resolve. When I read that Jews are taking down their mezuzahs, I do wonder how many have lost their resolve. I mean, in America, we're not exactly living in 1930s Germany. I mean, let's be sober here. If you're afraid to keep a mezuzah up in the United States, then you're really a fool for not making Aliyah, or for that matter, just moving to Bulgaria perhaps and just disappearing. So it's I don't know the resolve question. By the way, I just will note, and it is also on the internet, just Google Dennis Prager mezuzah. I have 1,000 columns up 20 years, 50 times a year. And so one of my recent columns is asking the non-Jews of America to put a mezuzah on their doorpost. Just as there's a famous case in America, in Montana, some years ago in the 1990s. A Jewish family had an anti-Semite throw a rock through their window because a menorah was sitting on the windowsill. And so every background, every ethnicity in Billings, Montana, went out in the street with menorahs. There's another great story in a Nazi POW, prisoner of war camp. They told the highest ranking officer of the Americans imprisoned, tomorrow morning we want all the Jews to step forward. The next morning, every single American stepped forward. So the Nazi commandant of the camp put a gun to the man's head and said, "Why did they all step forward?" He said, "Because we're all Jews." Ultimately, the Nazi put the gun down. Man's a great hero. He's honored at Yad Vashem. I want to see non-Jews say we're Jews now. I don't look just to Jews in anything, and certainly not now. 99% of America, 98% is not Jewish. If they can't come to our defense, it's not like they're going to be tortured by the Gestapo. Nobody's going to hurt them if they put a mezuzah on their doorpost, or if they show up at a pro-Israel demonstration. So if Jews are taking down mezuzahs, my Christian friends will put one up.
Dennis, thank you so much for being here. You are a giant of world Jewry, and I am not talking about your appreciable height. And you are a pioneer when it comes to course-correcting wokeism and the resultant impact on Western values. Thank you so much for your leadership and your wisdom.
Thank you very much.
I
hope we meet in Australia.
I would love to meet you, whether it's Los Angeles or Melbourne or Jerusalem or anywhere in between. Right. It would be the honor of a lifetime.
God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
You're special. Thank you very much.
You are so. God bless. Go to bed. If that's okay to say.
I am. Be well. Okay.
Be well. Bye. Before we say goodnight, I'd like to acknowledge Nicole Conn, Andy Liebler, Dr. Talia Bolton, Benji Jotkowitz, Shosh Landau, and all the team at Emunah Australia and Mizrachi Melbourne for their support in putting tonight's conversation together. I would also like to thank, again, the incredible Brave Journeys team, including the tireless work of my chief collaborator and cherished friend, who's been selflessly and masterfully post-producing all my content well into the middle of the night since the 7th of October, a day that will be forever etched into our broken hearts. And thank you to all of you for being here this evening. We, the Jewish people, are people who've endured so much and contributed so very much throughout our history, are not going anywhere. And whilst we will always pray for peace and the safety of all civilians, we will not cower, and we will raise our voices until all our loved ones come home. Bring them all home, now.
Free.